I don't really talk about this night anymore. Not to friends, not to family. I told myself that if I ever did speak it aloud again, it would be to strangers, people who could hear it without trying to fix it, without looking at me like I was broken. That's why I'm telling it here. Maybe someone listening can tell me I'm not the only one. Or maybe you can just understand. This all happened a year ago, but it still feels close, like it's waiting just outside the window. I had spent a few days in Austin visiting some old friends. I live in Louisiana, so it's a bit of a haul, but the trip was worth it. The end of September had rolled in, and with it, that sharp bite in the air that signals the year is dying down. I checked out of my Airbnb early, planning to hit the road by noon and get home before it got too dark. Just as I was about to leave, I got a message on Instagram. It was from Tom, an old friend from high school. We'd been tight back then, but life had taken us in different directions. We still followed each other, occasionally liked each other's photos, maybe dropped a birthday message once a year. That was about it. His message was short. "When you leaving Austin?" I told him I was heading out soon. "I'm about an hour east. You should stop by, catch up for a bit. Been a long time." Something about it felt sudden, but innocent enough. I figured, sure, why not? It was roughly in the direction I was going. 8 years was a long time, and maybe it'd be good to reconnect. I plugged the address into my GPS, and the route peeled off the main highway after a while. I drove through thick forests, crumbling rural towns, and stretches of road where my phone signal faded to nothing. It was getting late afternoon when I pulled into his driveway. The light hit that perfect golden hour, the world glowing just before sunset. Tom's house sat at the end of a long gravel road, surrounded by tall trees just starting to blush with fall colors. The house wasn't creepy, not yet. Just old, worn, weathered blue paint, wooden steps that sagged under your feet, and wind chimes that tinkled with every breath of wind. Tom was already outside when I arrived. Same grin, same warmth in his eyes. He looked genuinely happy to see me. We hugged on the porch and talked for a bit, then headed inside. The moment I stepped into his house, I noticed the smell. Not bad, not dirty, just old. Like the scent of dry leaves mixed with aged wood. It felt like a home that hadn't seen visitors in a long time. The living room had mismatched furniture, dusty picture frames, and a fireplace that clearly hadn't seen fire in years. It was quiet, too quiet. But what really caught my eye was the coat rack near the hallway. Hanging from it was a long black trench coat. Heavy, wool, high collar, the kind of coat you'd imagine in a noir film or some 1930s thriller. Something about it was wrong. It didn't fit. Not with the house, not with Tom. It looked displaced, like it had been left behind by someone who shouldn't have been there. I tried to shake off the feeling. We caught up over coffee in the kitchen, talked about teachers, old friends, where life had dragged us. At one point I asked, "You live out here alone?" Tom paused, just a second too long. "Yeah," he said, "just me. Been that way a while." I let it go. We talked a bit more, and eventually he offered to make dinner. I stayed. It was getting dark outside, that creeping rural dark that wraps around you like a wet blanket. No streetlights, no noise, just the quiet hum of crickets and trees. On the way to the bathroom, I passed the coat rack again. The coat. I could swear it had moved, just slightly, like it was closer to the edge than before. I reached out and touched it. It was freezing, like it had been sitting in a freezer, or worse. like it had just come inside from a snowstorm that didn't exist. Suddenly, I heard soft footsteps behind me. I turned. No one was there. Dinner was quiet. Tom barely touched his food. He kept glancing toward the hallway, his face pale, withdrawn. I tried to make a joke. "You expecting someone?" He didn't smile. "That coat?" I asked. "It yours?" He stared at me for a long second, then looked away. "It's part of the house," he said. I waited for a smirk, some kind of punchline. "Nothing. I know how that sounds," he added. "But you asked, and I told you the truth." After dinner, we moved into the living room. He put on a record, something old and warped. It crackled as it played, filling the room with slow, broken music. I couldn't help myself. "What do you mean, part of the house?" Tom leaned forward, voice lower now, like he didn't want the walls to hear. "You ever heard of the passenger's coat?" I shook my head. "It's local folklore. My granddad told me about it when I was a kid. They say there's this coat. It shows up in homes out in the woods. Always black, never dirty, always cold. It just appears, like someone left it behind. But no one ever sees who. It's just the coat, and once it's there, it stays." "Haunted?" I asked. "No," Tom said. "Worse. It doesn't want you to know it's haunted. It wants you to live with it. It wants to belong." The energy in the room shifted then. Even the air felt heavier. The record warped slightly. The chimes on the porch started going crazy. The lights flickered. "I should head out," I said, standing. Tom looked at me and said something that chilled me deeper than the coat had. "You can't." "What do you mean I can't?" I asked, half laughing. Tom stood slowly. His face had gone pale. "It doesn't like when people leave right after dinner." I tried to brush it off. "You're freaking me out." He didn't deny it. He just said, "Good." I grabbed my bag and went for the door. But when I opened it, the world outside wasn't the same. It was pitch black. The trees were gone, or hidden behind a wall of unnatural fog. The gravel road had disappeared. I turned back to look at Tom. He was backing away toward the kitchen. "I told you," he whispered. "It doesn't like when people leave." I stepped back inside, heart hammering. The door slammed shut behind me, hard enough to rattle the floor. And then I saw it. The coat was gone. Not on the rack. Not anywhere. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in a chair by the window, watching whatever remained of the trees sway under a wind I couldn't hear. Tom stayed in the kitchen. At one point, I heard him crying. Soft, broken sobs that seemed to echo in the rafters. Then silence. Then, around 3 a.m., the front door creaked open. No one touched it. I crept into the hallway. The coat rack was no longer empty. The coat had returned, still dripping wet, still ice cold, like it had come back from a storm that hadn't happened. I didn't wait for sunrise. As soon as there was light outside, I left. The trees were back. The road was visible. Everything looked normal again. But Tom didn't come out. I found a note on the table. His handwriting was shaky. "You looked at it too long. It knows your face now. If it follows you, don't hang it up. And whatever you do, don't wear it." I drove for hours, checking the mirror every mile. I never saw anything on the road, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Weeks passed. Then, 3 weeks ago, I came home from work. Hanging on the hook by my front door was a black trench coat, still wet, still cold, and I live alone. It started like any other trip. My cousin Jonas and I had planned a weekend hike and campout in one of the forest reserves in Västerbotten County, near the Lapland border in northern Sweden. Wild, raw country, endless pines, silent lakes, and forgotten trails that don't even show up on maps. Jonas mentioned a place he'd camped years ago, near an old mining site. Locals called it the Silent Site, not because it was peaceful, but because no birds ever chirped there. No buzzing, no rustling. Just silence. He claimed it freaked him out even as a teenager. We packed light, tents, sleeping gear, freeze-dried meals, water, and a bottle of vodka to cut through the alpine chill. After hiking several miles Friday morning, we veered off-trail into dense black spruce until we reached a mossy clearing by a small stream. It felt untouched. We set up camp just as the northern sky began shifting into that strange, endless dusk you only get in Scandinavian summers. Jonas was quiet, but eventually brought up the birds again. "Listen," he said. "Nothing. Not a single chirp. No bugs, not even the wind." And he was right. The silence was unnerving. Not peaceful, but expectant. Like something was watching. Jonas stirred the fire and said his grandmother used to tell stories about Sami ritual grounds, places where the land itself remembered what had happened. Places that could see you if you lingered too long. "Ghosts?" I asked, laughing. He just shook his head. Number older than ghosts. Something awake. We drank, laughed, and stayed up too late. But the woods didn't join us. They just listened. That night, I woke with a splitting headache. Not the kind you get from drinking. This was deep, like a vice tightening around my skull. A pressure, like before a storm, but thicker, like it was inside me. I glanced over. Jonas was asleep in his tent, snoring. The woods outside were now black. Not dark, black. The kind of black that swallows everything. And they were still silent. Then I heard it. A low hum, like a deep growl or someone clearing their throat. It came from far off, then nearer, then whispering, just outside my tent, just past the thin layer of fabric. Soft steps circled our camp. Deliberate, never rushing, like something was trying to be heard but not seen. I didn't move, didn't breathe. For what felt like an hour, I stayed frozen, listening. And then, just as suddenly, it all stopped. Morning brought no comfort. Jonas looked pale as he stepped out of his tent. "You remember the stream?" he asked. I nodded. "Of course. It's gone." I thought he was messing with me, but when we walked over, he was right. The stream wasn't just dried up. It had been erased. The indentation was still there, the grass flattened, but no water, no sound. Nothing. Then Jonas told me something he never had before. When he'd camped here years ago, his friend Lars had gone missing. They assumed he wandered off drunk. They searched, reported it. But the body was never found, and Jonas had never told anyone the exact spot they were camping. Until now. "Why did you bring me here?" I asked. He didn't answer. We broke camp that afternoon. I didn't argue. But when we tried to retrace our trail back, nothing looked familiar. The trees felt too close. The mossy hill was wrong. Even the sunlight looked filtered. Duller. Then our GPS went dead. Compass spinning. No signal, no maps. Just static. And then came the hum. Low, vibrating. From the earth. From the trees. Jonas dropped his gear. "Run!" So we ran. Roots grabbed at our feet. Branches slashed our arms. The forest twisted around us, endless and alien. We ran for what felt like hours until we burst into a clearing. But this wasn't salvation. In the center stood a cabin. Old. Weathered. But intact. No trail led to it. No chimney smoke, just the cabin. And a coat. A long black trench coat, hanging from a rusted nail on the door. Neither of us touched it. The air smelled wrong, like wet soil and something sweet, decaying. The trees around the clearing leaned inward, like they were eavesdropping. Jonas whispered, "We're not supposed to be here." Then the door creaked open. Inside, a single room. Bare floorboards. One chair. On it, a second coat. This one newer. Familiar. Jonas stared at it, then bolted. I followed. We didn't stop running until we reached a ranger station, shaking, half delirious and soaked in sweat. The rangers didn't believe us, said we must have gotten lost, dehydrated. When we mentioned the coats, they laughed. But then came the real kicker. They claimed there were no cabins in that area. The trails we said we used had been closed for years due to ground instability. And that stream we'd camped beside didn't exist on any map. Jonas doesn't talk to me anymore. He won't answer texts, calls, nothing. I think the fear burrowed too deep, broke something in him. But last month, a package arrived at my apartment. No return address. Inside was a coat, black, wool, still damp. Folded into the lining was a single note. "You stayed too long." It happened 6 years ago. I was 24, broke and drifting, hopping from city to city, couch to couch, unsure what I wanted from life. That's when my aunt Merrill offered me a strange opportunity. She was off on a 3-week yoga retreat across Europe and needed someone to house sit. She'd pay me, she said. Easy job. Just water the plants, check the mail, keep the lights on. The house was in Marrow Creek, Pennsylvania, a town so small it barely shows up on maps. It's the kind of place with fog-drenched streets, cracked sidewalks, and houses that always seem to be holding their breath. Her house was one of the oldest in town. Victorian bones, wallpaper that peeled at the edges, creaky staircases that groaned like they remembered too much. I'd visited as a kid, but only for short stays. Even then, the place gave me a weird feeling, like the walls had a pulse. Still, I needed the money. I said yes. When I arrived, she gave me the usual rundown. Wi-Fi, spare keys, boiler quirks. But just before she left, suitcase in hand, she turned to me and said 2 things that didn't sit right. Don't use the basement unless you absolutely have to. If you hear anything down there, don't answer it. She smiled as she said it, but her eyes didn't match. Then she left. The first 2 nights were quiet. The house creaked and sighed, like old places do, but nothing alarming. Still, I avoided the basement. The door to it sat at the end of the hall past the kitchen, plain, white, and too still. I didn't like walking past it. I started leaving lights on in every room, not because I was scared, at least that's what I told myself, but because it helped me feel less watched. On the 3rd night, I was brushing my teeth when I heard something. It was faint, just a whisper of sound beneath the hum of the faucet. I paused, toothbrush in midair, foam dripping into the sink. I held my breath and listened. Silence. I walked into the hallway. As I passed the basement door, I heard it again. Low, whispering. My name. Ellis! It was like being dropped into ice water. I stood there, frozen, listening. But the voice didn't return. I backed away. Slowly. That night, I didn't sleep. The next morning, I chalked it up to nerves. Maybe I imagined it. A dream, maybe. Old pipes, wind, something explainable. Still, I slid a chair in front of the basement door. Like that would stop anything. I spent the day walking around town, dusty antique shops, quiet diners, old men on porches who seemed to watch without blinking. I tried to shake the feeling crawling under my skin. But as I approached the house that evening, the air felt tighter, thicker, like it didn't want me coming back. And then I saw it. Someone watching me from the upstairs guest room window. I sprinted inside. The room was empty. That night, I did something stupid. I sat in the hallway beside the basement door. It was past 2 a.m. when I heard it again. "Ellis!" It was louder this time. Calm. Male. Just on the other side of the door. "I need your help. I'm stuck down here." I didn't move. "Please. I've been waiting a long time." It was too clear. Too real. Not a dream. Not the house settling. The next morning I called my aunt. When I told her what I heard, she went silent for a long time. Then finally asked, "You locked the basement door, right?" I swallowed. "Yeah. Why?" "Good. Don't answer it. Don't talk to it. And whatever you do, don't go down there." She hung up without saying anything else. That night, the voice returned. But it had changed. It wasn't pleading anymore. It was angry. "Why are you ignoring me?" It spoke slowly, as if mimicking my tone, like it was learning how to sound human. "I remember when you fell off your bike. You cried for your mum. You needed me." I froze. I'd never told anyone about that, not even Aunt Merrill. "I've always been here," it said, waiting. Then I noticed something that made my skin crawl. The basement key, which had always hung on a nail in the hallway, was now in the lock. Turned halfway. I bolted upstairs, slammed the bedroom door shut, and shoved a dresser in front of it. I heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow. Dragging. At one point, I swear I heard breathing just outside the door. By morning, nothing. The hallway was empty. The next 2 days were a blur. I barely ate, barely slept. I just sat and waited for night. And when it came, it wasn't just a voice anymore. I was lying in bed when I heard it. The bedroom doorknob. It turned, slightly, then again. I stared, paralyzed. The door didn't open. But when I finally worked up the courage to move, the basement door was open. Just a crack, a sliver of blackness waiting on the other side. That was it. I was done. I packed everything, bolted out of the house before the sun was up, and drove 4 hours straight to a friend's apartment. I didn't call my aunt, didn't explain, I just vanished. Weeks later, she emailed me. No greeting, no questions, just 3 words. It didn't follow. I still don't know what that means, but even now, sometimes I hear it. A whisper when the house is quiet, a voice in the static, a dream of stairs that stretch down forever. And at the bottom, something waiting. Arms outstretched, a face half-formed, and the voice, always the voice, asking, "Why did you leave me?"